Greetings. Welcome to this episode of Everyday Enchantment. I am your host, Stacey. And today, like every day, I have a guest on the show. I am excited. We're going to have a juicy conversation. Today, Lindsey Pope welcomes us, and she is a published author. She is a facilitator and a mental health advocate. So we're going to dive into some juiciness around that. And one of the things that I absolutely love about Lindsey is she really, truly is committed to sharing love and laughter and being truthful about well-being as well too. So that's a piece we're absolutely going to kind of pull out today on the podcast, using our experience, her experience, my experiences, to share wisdom with the people around us. So welcome, Lindsey. I can't wait to dive into this conversation, and thank you all for being here. Greetings. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. One of the things I know we're going to talk about today is staying true to your story, because so often, especially for people who've had very bumpy stories, there's can be a lot of pressure, right? For people to say, oh, maybe it didn't happen that way, or maybe you're not remembering correctly. And I want to talk about that today together. And I want to start with, what brought you here? What brought you to this moment of being a writer, being a mental health advocate? I'd love to hear a little bit just about your story of like how you found yourself in this moment.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for having me, Stacey. I'm so excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. I'm like
Thank you.
fangirling right now while we're on. um, so, yeah, I would say for me, I've been, writing chose me, I would say. From an early age, I would just start getting ideas and I would write stories down. And I would say also, honestly, for as long as I can remember, I just had pretty monumental anxiety. Of course, I didn't know it was anxiety back then. It would manifest itself in very physical ways for me. So I would often feel like I was physically ill. Now, looking back as an adult and because of what I've learned on my mental health journey, I can now recognize that, oh, that was anxiety that I was experiencing. So really writing really helps me sort of, create this world for myself that just felt like a safe place to sort of escape and get out of my own head and just having that creativity flow. Because I think the root of anxiety, what I found one of the roots to be, is really creativity. So I found for me that if I'm writing, fiction, it's actually a very productive way for me to manage my anxiety.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know how you feel about this, but to me, there's a lot of energy, right? Anxiety has this energy, it doesn't really know where to go. So it
Yeah.
kind of just stays in our bodies. It stays kind of just floating around and it's looking for an outlet. And what you just said reminds me, I think it was Brene Brown that said, if you don't act on your creativity, it's not like benign. Like it does affect us in ways that, again, whether it's physical symptoms or other ways that we find. And I feel the same way. Sometimes if I haven't done something creative in a while, it's like there's this, and I call it general malaise. That's like my kind of catch all for like, because I think anxiety too can be a really broad term for people. Like to your point, you
Mhm.
know, do people feel it like, a tightening of their chest? Do they feel like just the worry that they can't get out of? There's so many different ways that I think we describe it or experience it in our lives. And I love, because I was somebody too when I was young, and I don't know if this was you too, I escaped in reading in books.
Mhm.
And I absolutely, like, I told my family I was going to be a writer and an author. I can't. I think I was 8, and I'm writing stories and I'm having so much fun. And interestingly enough, which I'd be curious about your experience, I didn't filter myself back then, right? I was
Mhm.
writing fiction. I can
Yeah.
remember my first story was called The Pearl, and it was about this pearl and this young girl, and they were traveling around the world, and the pearl would get lost, and she'd go on these different adventures. And I didn't think, oh, I'm not good enough. I shouldn't be right? Like I didn't
Mhm.
have any of that. That now, when I got older and I really started writing and putting it out to the public, so to speak, I was like, oh, is this good enough? Who am I? And all of that. And I started to kind of hold back, and that created some anxiety for me
Oh, yeah.
as well too. So I'm curious what you felt like. Did you have this gift from when you were really young, and then did it ever feel stifled to you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I would say it came very naturally to me from a young age. Like I still actually have one of my first books that I wrote as a kid. I think I wrote it as a
Mm.
school project, and it's like my little drawings are in there. It's about a tiger and a cheetah.
Love it. I
um,
love I
yeah,
love it.
and so whatever reason I kept it, so I still have it like 30 years later, or however long it's been. And stifled, absolutely, yeah. I would say similar to you when it was just me writing, and I wasn't
Mhm.
looking for feedback or validation from the outside world. It was just very free flowing and just this beautiful experience. And it was interesting, similar to you. I had this dream, like I want to be published, I want to be out there, I want to be in
Mhm.
bookstores. At the same time, I felt that my anxiety was just so gripping at me when I would really
Mm.
think about pursuing that. So it would actually stifle my creativity, and I would begin to doubt myself and think, am I really good enough? Can I really do this? There's something that they talk about with authors, imposter syndrome is
Yeah.
real, like who am I to say I can write a book, right? Like,
Right.
you know,
I've decided, let's just start saying, "Who am I?" Like, I'm like a Marianne Williams. Who are we not? Let's just get
yes,
it out there, right? And
yes.
challenge that. But you're right, that message comes so strongly through, and I
Mhm.
don't know if it's just writers, because I think anybody trying to create something in the world is probably feeling that.
Oh,
I don't know.
exactly. Right.
That's
Any
just
of the creativity, right?
yeah.
Exactly. Hmm.
Well, so let me ask you this question. Okay, so you knew you wanted to be a writer. You felt
Yeah.
this kind of like, again, a little bit of like, "Ooh, am I going to do this?"
Mhm.
How did you work through that? Like, what did you do to really, because now you already have published one book, and you are is the children's book out yet? Tell me,
Yes. So
okay.
yeah, my first children's book launched on August 8th. So eight's my favorite number. So I had to pick 8-8.
I love it. Who wouldn't pick 8-8? That's like
Right.
I'm all about the numbers too, so that just sounds magical.
Yes. So it just lined up really well that date was there, and I was
Mhm.
like, I'm going for it. So yeah, so it's been out for 11 days now, and it's been a little bit of a whirlwind of 11 days in the best way possible. But people have been responding well, and I've been getting some positive feedback. My favorite feedback has been from kids. That told me they were like, I actually had a little boy walk up to me the other day, and he said, I read your Shelley story last night. And I thought that was the cutest thing in the world. So
Oh.
I was just like, seeing the light, I got to read it to one of my best friend's daughters, in person, and seeing her face light up and
Mhm.
watching her actually read it was just, I'm probably going to start crying if I talk about it. It's,
Yeah.
uh, it's what I've always wanted. Um,
Mhm.
so it just feels, and it just feels amazing when you do pursue your dreams and
Yeah.
actually have it come to life.
Well, and I think sometimes, again, we have all this fear around doing it, but there's also this like, well, what if I actually get what I want, right?
Yeah.
So it almost is like this interesting paradox, push pull that we can experience of like feeling nudged in this calling, like, I got to do this, I got to do this. And yet at the same time, this like, oh, what if this really happens?
Yeah,
Oh, how are
exactly.
you going to be in that moment? We haven't got there yet, but it almost sometimes I think that can shut us down too. Um,
Absolutely.
tell me a little bit why you decided to write a children's book. I'm curious.
Yeah, so I just started getting the ideas. And this was, I wrote Sheldon a little over 5 years ago.
Mhm.
And it was interesting because I actually wrote him when I was really fresh out of coming out of what I would call my dark night of the soul period. It was very intense anxiety period, very difficult for me personally. And
Mhm.
I was very fortunate that I found some amazing support at that time, including a spiritual director, and I had a
Mhm.
therapist, I had a psychiatrist, like I had a whole team of awesome people
Love it.
working with me. And I was using writing a lot to help myself. And so I sat down, I had this idea, like normally what happens is the stories will talk to me in my head first, and then I'll write it
Mhm.
down. So the story about a crab was talking to me, and I wrote it down. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I like this. This is kind of cute. And it was initially just a poem. And the whole concept is really about him wanting to spend the day by himself. And I
Mhm.
just found myself thinking, I wonder if this is something that other children's books have been out there. And I did a lot of research, and there's some that sort of talk about a similar concept, but not in the way that I talk about it. And
Mhm.
I thought, wow, okay, so this is kind of, I just hit on something that may be a little bit unique. And so the more I sort of explored that, I thought, "Huh, maybe there's something to this." But it
Mhm.
was interesting for me in the process of kind of going through learning about everything and getting people's feedback, because one of the things I heard time and again was people would say to me, well, it's not healthy for children to want to spend time alone. And I was like, what?
Mm. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I found that
Mhm.
very interesting that people were really challenging me with that.
Yeah.
And I found myself thinking, why do you think that way? Because inherently I felt that I disagreed with them.
Yeah.
Um, I thought back to my own childhood, and that was my way that I handled the world. I would go
Mhm.
retreat and be by
Mhm.
myself, and I would usually, write something, or like there was just a lot of alone time that I needed to like process different things, especially in the teenage years. So they're not easy
Oh,
for
yeah.
you.
That's like that could be like a dark window just in
Yeah. So I
Yes.
just found myself like, why would we tell kids not to spend time
Yeah.
alone? Especially if they're doing it in a healthy way. I can certainly understand that you can go extreme with anything and make it unhealthy, but that's not what my book does. So I found it really interesting. And that was actually one reason why I decided to publish the story by myself, because I know
Mm.
that if you go to a traditional publisher, you run the risk of them having the authority to change your story. And that was something that I said, no, I'm not doing that for this story. Yeah, it has to be.
What did you so this is fascinating, right? Because this is like the world at large. We're always speaking something that feels really true to us or intuitively, like again, this came through you. And then we kind of put it out into the world and the world's like, oh no, that's not good, or that's not how it should be, or whatever the case may be. What did you do in those moments where again you're getting that message? What did you tell? I'm just curious, what did you tell yourself, or how did you ground into like, no, I'm not changing this? And so then, you went a different path in terms of the publishing. But what got you to that place where you didn't kind of, again, there's a lot of pressure coming at us. So I'm just curious,
Yeah.
just for all of us, right? Because every time I hear somebody else's story, I always get inspired to, again, come back to my own and then feel like I have permission, then I don't have to change. I don't have to be something different than somebody wants me to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know for me, it definitely took me some time. Like I said, I originally wrote this over 5 years ago. So it's been a process.
Mhm.
So for me, I did change other aspects of the story. Like I would get feedback. And so for instance, there's three characters in the story. Somebody told me, oh, you should only have two. So I actually did take a character out of the story. That's one of my 5,000 revisions that I did. Um,
Oh,
and
the editing process.
characters. So it was
Mhm.
sometimes it was like I was listening a little too much to other people's voices and
Mm.
opinions. And then I would kind of make that change and it wouldn't feel right. And then
Yeah.
I would be like, wait a minute, this isn't my story. That's kind of the point where it got for me, was it wasn't my story anymore. It sort of just got lost. And I
Mm.
think my characters were a little mad at me. So they were like, we're not talking to you anymore. Which they had a right to be mad at me at that point. Um,
Sure.
yeah, because I sort of went against them, for a little bit. And then I
Mhm.
just kind of just spent more time just by myself and started learning and seeing, getting inspired by other authors who have done it themselves. That's
Mhm.
always helpful to me, to see other people, what they're doing, and also just coming back to the knowing that, I'm a spiritual person at my core, and I have what I refer to as God of my own understanding. And the relationship that we have is that God says, I love you for who you are. I created you.
Mhm.
So you stay true to yourself. So
Mhm.
in those moments where people would be challenging me, I really
Mhm.
like to come back to that voice, because
Mhm.
that feels like the voice that I should be listening to.
Yeah. Like, if
Yeah.
I can do it exactly the way I wanna do it, this is what I hear you saying, tell me what you
Yep.
think, but it's like, hearing everybody else's opinion, trying some things on, because there's nothing wrong with like, "Okay, let me explore that or experiment
Yeah.
with that and see
Mhm.
how that is," and then coming back to, "Okay, if I could do it the way I really want to do it, how would this look?" And again, whether somebody's writing a book or whether they're doing, making a change in their career or something else in their life, I think we have, again, there's this beautiful thing about getting feedback from people and getting support. And also this line of like, when it veers away from who, we are as a unique kind of expression of
Mhm.
imagination, art, creativity, and staying true to that. And what I found, I don't know if you found this in your own practices, as I have kind of, I don't know, evolved into whatever, wherever I am right now, I take in less around me,
Mhm.
especially when I'm creating something, because I, like you, I need that silence. I need that space to hear. I love how you talk about it, right? It reminds me of like the essence of Liz Gilbert's Big Magic,
Yeah.
when something wants to come through us and we're the channel. How do you make space for that? How do you allow that? And if you, not you personally, but any of us are like, oh, we're checking in with everybody else to see how it resonates. I think sometimes for me, it gets me kind of cloudy. Like you said, it almost like things kind of, you can't hear it as clearly. And then you have to go, okay.
Mhm.
Like, everybody gets pushed back a little bit.
Yep.
And again, not that anybody has, bad intentions or anything like that, but it's just,
No.
I really believe intuitives and I believe that everybody has these gifts. The more space we create, and not that everybody's looks the same, but we need that space that is ours alone, that we absolutely, like, I love how you said that we can stay true to what is actually ours and how it wants to be. Like, I always say, I love how this started as a poem for you, because to
Yeah.
me, the other beautiful thing is like, what form does this want to take? Because
Mhm.
my brain will be like, oh, it should be a poem, or it should be a children's story, it should be a novel, it should be, right? Like my brain is going to go five stories past whatever this is and have like this whole detailed plan of how it should be. And what I always have to come back to, and I don't know if you do this too, it's like, but what does this thing want? Like, what form
Mhm.
does it want to take? Because usually, if I try to make it, I don't know, not a poem, if it wanted to be a poem, it falls flat too. Like,
Oh, absolutely.
so
Yeah.
I'm curious what you think about all of that.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad you brought up Big Magic because I knew I was gonna bring it up.
I
So
love that's like if you're an artist or creator, it's like such a beautiful
it
reference.
really is, and it was so helpful for me to read that. I'm lucky. I'm a part of a great virtual book club, and we chose that book, so it was just wonderful, kind of divine timing. And I know one of the things that she said in there that really there was a lot that resonated with me, but the one that kind of helped me actually finally hit the green light to go was that she said, just invite your fear as a passenger in the car.
Mhm.
It's not that you're trying to get rid of it, but it's gonna be there and it's gonna ride with you. And I thought, oh yeah, that's genius, because I think I spent so much time trying to get rid of my anxiety, and yeah, it's not gonna happen. Right?
Mm.
Like that's
Well,
so
like a fix, like, "Hey, this is a
much.
problem I need to solve." Right,
Right.
exactly.
So then it
Yeah.
then it became a question of, okay, well, maybe I should just, like she said, maybe I should just have it in the passenger seat and it can ride with me. It's not allowed to, take the directions or control the radio stations. But it can be sitting there and it can know that it's there, and I'll know that it's there, but I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
I'm just like, you're not in control, but you're here. You're a companion for me. That's okay. We're moving forward anyway.
Yeah,
So
you're right, it's a beautiful energy of surrender and allowing,
yes.
and not trying to like, "Oh, I can't get there wherever I'm trying to go until I fix," right, that this fear that I have or anxiety or whatever that is. And, it's interesting to me too, because I'm curious, have you ever thought about, again, this passenger in your car as having a beautiful purpose and wisdom, right? Because we generally tend to say, oh, anxiety is bad, I want to get rid of it, or whatever, fill in the blank, whatever each person, if you're listening and that doesn't quite resonate. To me, it's like, what if we snuggle up? And I don't know if Liz Gilbert says this, but this is just kind of how I think about things. You snuggle up to the parts of you, right, that people maybe would misunderstand or judge or label as whatever, and say, what if this anxiety that I felt, what if these experiences I've had in my life actually help me be this creative author, writer, intuitive being on the planet, rather than I have to fight against it, like it be in battle with it, it actually has some value. I don't know. I don't know if you've experienced that's kind of my perspective. I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
completely agree with you. That's been a huge shift for me, and it's allowed me to feel just so much better about myself in general because I know that those of us who have things like anxiety, the truth is that we're highly intelligent. And
Mhm.
that because of that, we sort of know how to trick ourselves and we know how to bring ourselves down. But then there's
Mhm.
another side of that that's, oh, wait a minute, we are highly intelligent. We are highly empathetic people. We're highly sensitive people. So for me in my writing, absolutely, I believe that it gives me that power to write at that deeper level. And I know that I've written things that people have told me, really touch them and touch their hearts. And I know that I wouldn't be able to do that if I hadn't have had these personal experiences that have been a little more difficult because, I wouldn't understand what would help. And
Yeah.
actually the first book that I came out with, that started as just me kind of journaling, and I was using the spiritual practice that I now teach about. It's a wonderful practice where you essentially write letters to yourself from your own higher power, whatever that is, and you're just writing these love, like love
Yeah.
letters.
Oh, I'm in. I love it. I love
It's
anytime we're connecting to those parts of ourselves.
yeah,
Gosh, you could even ask the anxiety, right, to write a letter
yeah,
and see what,
exactly, right,
and again, it's all information in such a beautiful way that we can
yeah,
use. And I love, there are people I think on the planet that touch some really dark places or walk through some really dark places so that they can extract wisdom through all sorts of ways that they, expressing. And you're right. Like, to me, maybe not every child wants to be alone. Maybe not every child, but especially in the last couple of years, I look at how much like the world, at large, and particularly the pandemic is affecting the mental health of children. And how do we want to talk about it in an honest way? How do we, I know there's this fear of like, well, we don't want to give a child an idea, right? And but I'm like, kids are already feeling these things and experiencing them. How do we help them walk with them in a way? And again, instead of, I know for me, it was like, let's fix this, distract it, numb it out. Instead of
hmm
that way, which doesn't actually help us, what can we do instead? And so I love the idea. So if somebody was listening, I'm just thinking about this, like even just writing your own experiences or just, journaling, yeah, maybe you get a story in your head and you just write it out. Like, how do you write every day? I'm just curious kind of what practice you use just to give other people that are listening some ideas.
Yeah. So for me, the biggest key to success for me is that I have to take myself outside. So if I'm
Mm.
like here in my house, in my office, it just does not work for me. I
Mhm.
did a lot of my writing actually, the area where I live now, even before I lived here, I was driving up here every single week and I was writing by the water. I love the water. I find it very calming. And of course, my book is about water animals.
Yeah.
Go figure. But
There's much healing in the elements
yeah,
around
there
us,
really
so
is.
I'm with
And
you.
it's just such a lovely, and even before that, like even back in college, I would just go, sit out on my college campus and just write. And I like to have that private space. I absolutely
Mhm.
cannot have anyone around me. I can't hear talking. There can't be like distractions. So
Mhm.
that for me is my number one is I have to get that space away. And if I'm not finding that creativity is free flowing, it may not be, and that's sometimes
Right.
frustrating for me. But it's okay. You can give yourself that journal prompt, or you can just start
Mhm.
by writing exactly whatever it is that you're doing or thinking or going through, and you can just sort of
Mhm.
see if anything comes out of that. So you don't have to put this pressure on yourself, like, oh, I need to write this amazing best-selling book. Like,
Right. And it needs
yeah,
to come out right now, and why isn't that happening?
yeah, yeah. And I know
Yeah.
one thing that used to always get me was I would get these ideas and I would start doing this like speed writing. So I would like super fast, like be
Mm.
writing these ideas, and then it would just stop. but it wasn't, but the actual story wasn't done. It would just be like, and then I'd hit this like writer's block and I'd have like nothing. And then I would feel this frustration, like, oh, I can't finish the story. And it was just so mentally like taxing for me. And I've just come to now accept that, they may not all get done, and that's okay. Sort of just like accepting where you're at. I
That's
think
a
that
really
it's
beautiful insight, because not everything
yeah,
needs to be out of, maybe that was just for me, right?
yeah.
Or maybe maybe
Mhm.
3 years from now, something else will ping and I'll pick that back up. That's a really, really good point for
Right. And I do
all
believe,
of
I
us.
know from my own story at least, that like, Sheldon waited for me. I think if a character or person, whoever you're writing about, loves you enough, they will wait for you.
Oh,
So
I
like,
love that.
yeah, he waited for me very patiently for over 5 years. He's like, all right.
I'll hang out here on the beach, like doing my crab thing. And then, yeah. And,
Yeah.
that's another really wise thing, because I also think sometimes, especially for intuitives, I know for me, like I'll get a message and I used to think, oh, I need to act on it or do something with it right away. And what I
Hmm.
realized over time is sometimes it's like telling me something or giving me like a breadcrumb about something that's like 3 years away or 5 years
Yeah.
away, or right. And that impulse to like, oh, I need to act,
Yeah.
and just kind of taking a pause and going, ooh, is this something that just wants to kind of simmer? Or I do what you do. I just talk and ask and be like, okay, what's going on? Give me a little bit more information.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's clear, sometimes it's not. And then it's just getting comfortable with sometimes the uncertainty. We just don't know all the things yet.
Right. Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more, because I felt the same way when I first read it. I felt like I took
Mhm.
on all this pressure, like, okay,
Mhm.
I have to be this published author like tomorrow, and I have to get picked up by a
Mhm.
publisher. And then all that stress and that pressure just ultimately crumbled me and just made me, put them away. And just, I was like, this is too overwhelming. And
Yeah.
then when I finally just decided, no, I'm going to do it myself, and this is going to be me and him. We're just going to partner up and we're going to make it happen, and did it. And now with where I'm living, I'm living in a water community. So
Mhm.
people just by nature, they love him. They love the
Yep.
characters. He fits in everywhere I go. So like the whole community I live in is decorated maritime. There's all
Mhm.
these pirate events, and he's reading about pirates in the story. So he literally just fits right into,
Yeah.
I
He's
mean, I'm
his own little energy. That's just perfect. And okay, so Lindsay, if people want to buy the book, they want
like,
to learn more about you, where can they how can they engage with you? How can they find you?
yeah, absolutely. So I would say to follow me, Lindsey Pope Writes on Facebook. And then also I do have an author page on Amazon. If you look up Lindsey Pope, you can find me in their author central. So
We will
you'll
put
see,
all of these in the show notes for people to have easy links.
yeah, of course.
Okay, can they buy the book on Amazon? How
Yeah,
do they
they
buy
can.
the book?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And they can also buy directly through me. So, with my personality, I love personalizing things. So
Mhm.
if you want me to, of course, write your name on it, write a personalized message for you or a child in your life, I'd be very happy to do that. And I include like a coloring page, and there's some other fun little surprises I have in there.
I love
So,
it, and I love
yeah,
exposing children, like, again, the next generation, to ways to do it differently, that not to I don't live in a space of regret, I know you don't either.
yeah.
It just but there are things that we've learned and that we've done that we can absolutely offer, a different path and share different ways for kids, because again, being in this world, I've like if nothing else, our mental well-being to me should be first and foremost. And I know a lot of us have worked really diligently to get into places where, again, we've given ourselves permission to even put that first. But I just imagine a world where kids are have so much more access to, just being on this planet, and
Mhm.
not necessarily learning all of the filters or all the ways to like hold back, and like, again, at the heart of what you're saying, staying true to their story right from the get go.
Yeah. Yes,
Right,
the message I've
exactly.
been writing in everyone's book
Yeah.
is always stay true to your wonderful self. Because
Oh,
I really
yeah.
want kids to feel that and to know that that's the message that I want them to feel when they're reading this story.
Oh, I love it. I'm so glad that you, again, I think we all kind of wrestle with the feelings of like, can I do this and all of that? But I do believe, like I said earlier, it's like, let's just say why not? Let's just do it. And if you're listening right now, you have a book in you, you have art in you, you have something, be inspired to take whatever that first step is. Just maybe, I don't know, just like you said a few minutes ago, I just decided. And I think
Mhm.
that that's a really important step for all of us. It's like, I just decided. I didn't need somebody to come on, down and say, you are a writer. Now you're official. Like, I just
Right.
decided.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for
Thank
sharing all
you.
the juicy goodness of how you've kind of arrived at this place, which to me is just, I feel like what's his name? Sheldon?
Yeah.
You call him Shelly. I
Yes.
feel like
Yeah. That's a
Shelly's gonna have
nickname
like a
that we hear
life.
the other day from my neighborhood friend. So, and I love it.
I love. So Shelly's going to have this incredible, I'm sure, adventure that is just starting. I can feel it intuitively
Oh, thank
already.
you.
And thank you for joining us on the podcast. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. And I can't wait to see everybody on the flip side in the next episode. Join us shortly for that. That's it for now, loves. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. Get all the juicy details and links we've mentioned in the show notes. If learning more about how you can use your own enchantment to live a oh hell yes life, come get your own coaching session with me by going to staceyandon.com and signing up for my homepage. And as always, come chat with me about this topic and all things enchantment in my Facebook group, Everyday Enchantment. See you on the flip side.